Looking for the absolute easiest way to shoot a bunch of Qflash shots where you have to work from the same spot and produce files that are so consistent in their exposure and their color that they'll all sail right through the lab without any retouching at all? Watch this.
Lesson 10. Qflash in manual exposure mode.
Let's say we're at a graduation ceremony for a week-long summer course for kids, and they need a nice picture of each one of the kids receiving their certificate from the instructor. We can set up the frame and kindly ask the instructor to present the award in the same basic spot every time, which is usually no big deal. Then, we'll measure the available room light and see how much of it we're going to use. I've chosen to shoot at ISO 800, and I like to shoot with a medium zoom lens when I can, set around 50 to 70 millimeters or so. And I prefer to use f8 just to be sure that I have enough depth of field to keep the kids and the instructor and the certificate in sharp focus no matter what happens. In this room, that means we're starting with a shutter speed of a 60th of a second for our test shot, and I'll be using the manual exposure mode on my camera with the spot metering exposure pattern selected. I'll also use single center autofocus too. Here's a perfect exposure of just the room light, no flash, at f8 at a 60th of a second. And now I'll underexpose the room by increasing the shutter speed up to 125th of a second. Here's the room light underexposed by one stop. Remember, no flash at this point. This leaves the subjects kind of in the dark, and it makes room for the Qflash to provide me with some really nice quality light. It's time to set the Qflash. For this job, I'll connect a Quantum Turbo 2x2 power pack onto my tripod using the cool Quantum QBC clamp. Then I'll connect my camera on a bracket that allows me to rotate between horizontal and vertical, and I'll mount all that to a tripod too. Next, we'll add a Quantum Qflash T5d-R fitted with the Quantum fold-up softbox using the hotspot reducer inside, of course, and connect it to the Turbo 2x2, and then connect up the camera and the Qflash by using the standard D adapter cable for my camera. Then I'll place the tripod in an appropriate spot to get great shots but still be out of the way. And of course I want fast, repeatable exposures for a series of pictures that all look, well, basically the same. For this, I will choose the simple, easy to use manual exposure mode on the Qflash. I can use it by pressing the mode button and using the up or down arrows to select the manual exposure mode. This will bring up the power level setting right here. Full power is displayed by 1/1, and half power is displayed by 1/2, quarter power is 1/4, you get the rest. To adjust the manual power setting, just press the Set button and you'll see the power settings start to blink. Then simply press the down or the up arrows to lower or raise the power in 1/3 stop increments. And remember, we had a perfect exposure of the room at f8 at a 60th of a second using ISO 800. Then we drop the exposure of the room down by a full stop by raising that shutter speed up to 1/125th of a second, remember? So let's use our meter set to the camera's ISO of 800 and the camera's shutter speed of 125th and see how much available room light there is where the subjects will be standing. It reads f5.6 at 125th as expected, of course with no flash firing. And if we take a test shot without the Qflash, we see that it's, pretty dark. Well, we now want to add in the Qflash to bring that exposure back up to f8 at 125th of a second. That'll give us some sweet looking Qflash. The Qflash is a rather powerful light source. So I'll start off by setting it at 1/4 power and move over to the subject's position in order to measure the light. I'll use my flash meter in flash mode, which will measure both the flash and the available room light together, so I don't have to do it separately. And the flash meter is set to ISO 800, just like my camera, and the shutter set to 125th, just like my camera, and I'll see what the Qflash adds. The meter reads f 8 3/10 now, which is a little more than I want. So I could move the tripod back a little further to reduce the light output, and I could zoom in order to reframe, or I could simply just turn the manual power setting down on the Qflash with one arrow click, which will reduce the flash power by 3/10 of an f-stop. And that'll give me a meter reading of just what I need, f8 at 125th of a second. Finally, I'll perform a custom white balance to neutralize the room light and the flash at the same time and fire away. As long as the subjects are in the same spot when I shoot the pictures, my exposure and my color will be terrific, and they'll allow me the luxury of shooting in JPEG mode and sending the files off to the lab for quick printing with no color corrections needed. Once again, the power and the easy-to-live-with control panel, the Qflash, come through for me.
Tips from a pro.
Manual mode rocks.
More pops.
Manual mode on the Qflash is also a great way to stretch the amount of shots that you get from a full charge on your power pack. It will limit the amount of power used to a set amount, whereas the QTTL and auto modes will adjust the power to your camera settings and typically use up the power faster. At full manual power, you can expect about 400 pops from a Quantum Turbo 2x2 power pack. And if we turn the power down to about half power, we get around 800 pops from that same turbo pack. Quarter power gives us about 1,500 pops, and 1/8 power gives us well over 3,000 pops, which is certainly more than I ever need in one of my days shooting.